Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to talk about economic transformation, right? It's the vast economic growth that the United States experienced from about 1820 to 1860. Now we're going to call this economic growth the market revolution. That's what most historians call this period in the United States. Right, the market revolution was this huge increase in manufacturing, commerce, finance. What came out of this era was a class divided society, an industrial society. And we're going to talk about all that, right? So just keep in mind that what we're going to talk about for the next few lectures is this huge economic transformation in the United States to make it, a very wealthy nation, a very, one of the world leaders in industry. And this came about fairly quickly. So let's go ahead and get started. So, first of all, we need to talk about industrialization, the Industrial Revolution, because it came to the United States, in the late 1700s. And we can think of the Industrial Revolution as a new way of doing things, right? Factories were built, new technologies were created, work routines were reorganized, right? For 1,000 years, people did things pretty much the same, right? They had farms, and on the farm, you used animal labor to help you out, things like that. But, in the late 1700s, the Industrial Revolution began in Britain, and people started to developing new technologies. And a lot of this was steam technology, right? You burn coal, you can power machines through steam. And so, you see new technologies, you see factories, you see mass production, right? Mass production of goods. None of this stuff existed before the Industrial Revolution, right? People could, luxury items became part of everyday life because now you could produce these luxury items. Um, you know, you can produce a lot of these things, right, with mass production. So anyway, um, let's talk about the factory system a little bit, right? The modern factory emerged as a part of the Industrial Revolution. It, concentrated production of goods under one roof, right? In these factories were new technological innovations like new machinery. Um, you know, Before this, you had to use water power. Okay, you had to use streams to maybe, the power of water would, turn a wheel, and that would, turn some machinery. But with steam and coal power, now you didn't need to stream, right? You didn't need water. You could build a factory anywhere you wanted, and they started to do that in the cities. Okay. So anyway, the U.S. caught on to industrialization pretty early, and it soon, U.S. industrial might soon began to catch up with Britain, who was the industrial powerhouse of the world. So factories needed workers, obviously, and the prospect of higher wages caused a lot of immigrants to want to come to the United States. It also caused a lot of people from the countryside to, give up farming and go to the cities for wage work. Factories also hired women, right? Most prominently in textile factories, which is cloth. But many women and men from the countryside flocked to the cities because, better wages could be earned from factory work than farm work. So you're going to see this huge growth in the cities due to the Industrial Revolution, right? But still, most people lived in the countryside on farms. But the population in the cities were growing because of labor, right? Work, opportunities to work. But we need to talk about technological innovation, like this slide. Technological innovation was a large part of the Industrial Revolution. Notably, Eli Whitney invented a machine that separated seeds from cotton. And this is the machine. This is the cotton gin. Now, separating seeds from cotton was very labor intensive before the cotton gin, right? You had to do it by hand. You could pick cotton, but it had all these seeds in it, and you had to pick out these seeds by hand. Well, with this machine, you just crank it, and it takes all the seeds out automatically. And you can produce huge amounts of cotton over a small amount of time. You can mass produce cotton. Okay? And a lot of technological innovations were, invented during this time, like lathes, weaving looms, which you could make a huge amount of cloth at higher speeds. And these machines led to, much higher output, right? And led to mass production. And, American companies began to dominate European markets. So, for example, the Singer sewing machine company, which was an American company, controlled 75% of the world market for sewing machines. So the United States is becoming an economic powerhouse, okay, fairly quickly. But the cotton gin, it's important because, well, people thought slave labor was going to die out with the decline of the tobacco industry. But now that you have a cotton gin, planters are more interested in planting cotton, which grows very well in the South. And so planters are establishing cotton plantations throughout the South, throughout these new states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And guess what? They're bringing slaves with them because they need slave labor to pick the cotton. And so the cotton gin led to, a exponential growth in slavery. So instead of slavery dying out, some of these technological innovations are actually leading to the growth of slavery. And one of those is the cotton gin. So, the Industrial Revolution also changed the nature of workers and workers' lives. As factory work spread, more and more workers moved from the farms to the cities. And in the cities, they worked under a wage, right? They worked for a wage, usually an hourly wage, like a lot of us do, right? Probably a few cents an hour back then. And they labored under the direction of an employer, right? In the countryside, you didn't have an employer. You worked for yourself. So in the cities, if you're working in a factory, you lose that independence of working for yourself. You have a boss. And so generally, the people in the cities, they received very meager wages, right? They didn't earn very much. They had little job security. They could be fired for anything. And the factories were a very, very dangerous place to work. Right? There was no workers' compensation. If you got hurt on the job, if you lost an arm, well, too bad, right? You don't get any compensation. You just can never work again. You'd probably be poor for the rest of your life. And so, a lot of workers felt like, we need to band together to have a better, better working conditions, right? You need a better, more equal relationship between the business owners and the workers. And so workers began to form unions, right? They attempted to bargain with their employers over low wages and long work hours. And they came up with the strike, right? They would stop working and they would strike until they got what they wanted. And so we're going to talk about the growth of unions later on. But part of this economic transformation or this market revolution is you need to get goods, you need to transport goods, right? You need to find faster and cheaper ways to get your goods to consumers. And so you need transportation. Now, beginning in 1810, the United States began to construct a huge system of canals and roads that linked all of the states together. This transportation system set in motion the market revolution, okay, as well as a huge migration of people who use these new roads and canals to travel. So with adequate transportation, people began to move all across the country. A lot of people began to move west. And the government, they paid for this stuff a lot of the time. state and local governments, they paid to develop canals. Okay. For example, New York's legislature. New York. Okay, they agreed to build the Erie Canal, right? It was 364-mile waterway. It connected the Hudson River to Lake Erie up in New York. And the canal was an instant economic success, and I'm going to attach a video that you can watch about the canal. And it brought instant prosperity to farmers of central and western New York and the entire region up there. Basically, the Erie Canal built New York into what it is today. And the success of the Erie Canal, right, it's enriching everybody around it because these farmers are able to put their goods on this canal and sell it to places far off. They can, their goods might even end up in Europe, right? And that's due to this canal. But they couldn't do it without the invention of the steamboat, which we talked about earlier. And eventually they're going to build railroads. Railroads are going to start to become widespread by the late 1830s, but we'll talk about that later. But for now, steamboats and canals are the main way to get your goods from one place to another. So, the expansion of industry, this industrial revolution, the market revolution, it's increasing Americans' urban population, right? The cities are starting to swell up with people. By 1820 to 1840, the total number of city dwellers grew by 4 times, right? And in the cities, there's going to be this new economic order that came out of the Industrial Revolution. It's going to be social classes, the social classes we know today, right? You have the wealthy people, the upper class, you have the middle class, and then you have the working class. Well, this class system came out of the Industrial Revolution, right? Before industrialization, Americans thought of their society in terms of rank, right? Notable families had higher status than the lower orders, but the Industrial Revolution shattered the social order. And, it fragmented society into these distinct classes. But, notably at the very top, you have these business owners, right? And these, they have the factory owners, they own, the steel industry, and these people, usually it's one guy, right? They're going to amass this huge amount of wealth, right? The richest people in the nation are going to be far richer than anybody had ever been up to that time, right? The word millionaire was invented during this time. This is all, because of the Industrial Revolution. And so at the very top, you have this upper class. They usually own the businesses, right? Then you have a middle class, and these middle class were kind of like the managers, right? The lawyers, things like that. They were doing okay for themselves. And then at the bottom, you have the working class, right? These were the workers, right? They're putting in the manual labor. Anyway, the rich are becoming richer and richer. And, you can sort of draw parallels to today. If you listen to Bernie Sanders, he talks about, the top 1%, the richest 1% of the United States owns the vast majority of the wealth in the country. Well, you can thank the Industrial Revolution for that. This kind of thing was happening back then, too. So just remember for today that, we're talking about this huge economic growth of the United States, right? We're talking about the ways in which, the United States allowed that to happen. Technological innovation, factory labor, the growth of the cities, transportation with the Erie Canal, and, steamboats, things like that. And so the United States is quickly becoming, it's catching up. to the big industrial powers of Europe. It's not going to overtake them for a while, but it's catching up very quickly very quickly in this early United States. And so don't forget to watch the accompanying videos that I'm going to post. And also don't forget to fill out your 10-minute journal. Just write for 10 minutes on what you've learned today. And we will talk to you later.